on that for everybody who's joined us. So welcome everybody to What the L. As we said, it's a great pun. It's all about it's a live Q&A where we aim to help explain the up and coming changes to Part L, concentrating on the commissioning of systems. We'll talk about how it may affect what you do now and what you should be doing in the future, and we'll be answering some of your burning questions. So I'm just going to say as well that this session will be recorded, so it will be circulated afterwards for anybody who's joined the webinar this evening, and we'll be answering as many questions as we can tonight. We also have some queued up questions from when we sent out the alert this was going to happen, so we'll be trying to answer those as much as possible. Any questions that we don't get time to answer, we will answer those directly with you. We will send that out with a recording, as well as you'll be receiving a really handy quick infographic guide that you can refer to after this session as well. So if you have a question, just pop it into the Q&A section up here, and we'll try and go through those at the end. The plan is to do around about 15-20 minutes of explaining what Part L is, BS 7593, and taking you through that and helping you to understand in detail what that means. And then we will go and open it up to some of those really good practical scenario questions that we have. So meet the team. Here are the panel. My name's Claire Miller. I'm the Marketing Director at ADEY. We're also joined by Dr. Neil Watson, our Director of Strategy, who holds a PhD in corrosion chemistry, so is highly qualified to talk about the effects of poor water quality in a system. Neil is also involved in the standards development within the UK, Europe, and the US. So he represents BSRIA on the British Standards Committee for Treatment of Water Boilers, which does develop BS 7593. As well as that, he sits on the Benchmark Steering Committee within HHIC. So extremely knowledgeable about all of these processes. So that's why I would urge you to ask any questions that you want to. If he doesn't know the answer, we'll be able to get to the bottom of that, but I'm sure he'll know everything there is to know. We also have Colin Yerp, who is our head of training. Colin is a qualified gas engineer. He owned his own business and has been an engineer from shorts, having it, Colin, out of school. And so he owned his own business, and so he's been on the tools for many years. He joined ADEY in 2006 to work alongside Chris ADEY to deliver our training program, and has since then developed and evolved our training to help all of you guys to understand how to make sure that you have extreme cleanliness of a system to have optimum efficiency. So that's the team. So this evening we'll be spending, as I said, 20 minutes walking through the changes to Part L for conservation of fuel and power, which is changing on the 15th of June. And these changes mean that water quality checking, maintenance and protection will need to be carried out on new and existing dwellings in line with BS 7593 2019. So today we'll talk about the changes, the steps you must take to follow BS 7593 and how you can comply. So without further ado, I will hand over to Neil, who will start that explanation for us. Neil.
Hello, everybody. So building regulations, Part L 2021 comes into force June 15th, 2022. The reason why we are moving into a change for the regulations is because we're moving towards the net zero climate objectives. And this is actually referred to as an uplift in Part L, really putting an emphasis and focus on energy conservation. So really the main reason why it's changing is because we absolutely need that focus if we're going to get anywhere near the 2050 zero carbon target. As I mentioned, this is Part L for conservation of fuel and power, but it's important to note that the way that the document is now written has changed quite significantly since the last Part L came out. The main change in terms of reading the document is that, or two changes really. Previously, there was a separate document for existing systems and for new build. They've now been rolled into one, and that's what's referred to as volume 1. And that's for dwellings, excuse me. So volume 1 is new and existing dwellings, and volume 2 covers all buildings other than dwellings. So that's a key change to the layout. The second change is structural. Up until now, the ADL, this approved document L, was really guidance which gave you the general direction of what you had to do. But in order to get that level of detail that you needed, you were provided with a domestic commissioning guide. So you would go to compliance guide, to a domestic services compliance guide, where you would pull out all of the information that you needed in order to meet building regulations. That's changed. They've removed that compliance guide. Something that's a good idea, something's a bad idea. But what it's done is it's pulled up all of the most relevant information from that compliance guide and brought it into this document. So you don't need to dig down into that compliance guide to find out what you need to do. All of the things that are really important have been brought up into here. However, what it has done as well, though, is you can't pull up everything from those guides into this document. So it does make reference a lot to other standards that you need to go and look at. And as an example, there are now 35 standards referenced within this document, and the last part L only had 7 standards referenced. And the most important one of those is BS 7593 2019, which is for the preparation and commissioning of domestic heating systems. That's the most relevant to the section that we're going to talk about today. I see there is a question in from Ewan in the chat asking if this is just for England. And at this point in time, it is just for England because the others are yet to be released. The expectation is that Wales will follow very, very strongly on Scotland, on England. Scotland may well keep the compliance guide. So we're really waiting to see what happens when those come in. Okay, next slide, please, Claire. So in terms of what we're going to talk about today, if any of you have a copy of this compliance guide, all 102 pages of it, you can throw away the first 64 pages and go straight to page 65. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit losing my attention because I've just got a cat that's just stepped onto my desk. The section around treatment of systems falls under a new section that's been put in called commissioning. And the statement under section 8.8 is the specific guidance for commissioning of heating systems and domestic hot water. Important to note within this statement, and again, this is a change from the previous part L, it talks about a heating appliance or a heat generation source. So what it's done is it's pulled together all of those requirements in one statement that are exactly the same. So in the previous document, if you were installing a condensing boiler, you would have a section on condensing boilers telling you all about how you need to treat that system. And if you were then wanting to fit a heat pump, you'd have to go to a completely separate section of the document to find out the requirements for that. They've all been pulled together. And fortunately, you can see that the requirements for all of those systems are effectively the same. There is a requirement for cleaning and flushing of the heating and primary hot water circuit, a requirement to add a chemical inhibitor into that circuit to protect against scaling corrosion. And in hard water, you need to treat the feed water to water heaters and hot water circuits of combis to reduce limescale. All of that is exactly the same as it was from the previous document. The slight subtle change is that it talks now about domestic central heating systems being prepared and commissioned to BS 7593. Previously, it said BS 7593 2006. BS 7593 has now been updated in 2019 with a number of changes that we'll talk about a little bit later. But you'll note that the date isn't here on the statement. And the reason for that is it allows for any updates to a standard. If it's undated, the assumption is always that the latest standard applies. The other point worth mentioning now is the benchmark commissioning checklist has again been uplifted into this part of Part L, into the approved document, and is going to take a much more significant role with how we manage heating systems moving forwards. Okay, Claire? Interestingly, it also lays out the legal requirements within this document. It's something that you may not have picked up from the old document, but there is a requirement when commissioning a heating system to give the local authority a notice confirming that the fixed building service, so either heating or electricity, has been commissioned in accordance, it says here, with a procedure approved by the Secretary of State. What that means is it's been commissioned following building regulations. Fortunately, the heating system still falls under a competent person scheme, so all of that notification will be made by GasSafe, for example, once you register your boiler with them. So not really much of a change there from what you should be doing at the moment. Claire? So we have three key sections to this Part L, which is, as we've just talked about, the commissioning section is held together by BS 7593, which, as I mentioned, is an external BSI document, and the benchmark commissioning checklist. So we're now just going to move along and talk about the 7593. Just taking a quick look at what the specific changes are with BS 7593 2019. The main reason for the changes is it's gone from a code of practice for commissioning to life of system care. So it takes into consideration now maintenance requirements that you need to do moving forwards. And that's really, really important with heating systems, because if you don't maintain the quality of the water system, then your efficacy drops off and we won't be anywhere near achieving the carbon reduction that we hope to achieve by bringing these new procedures into place. So a few things remain. The chemical clean remains, the inhibitor added after final flush remains. There was originally a statement regarding filters saying that they may be beneficial, but that has been significantly strengthened in the 2019 standard to say that a permanent inline filter needs to be fitted on all systems. The other key change for this presentation is the fact that you need to check the concentration of the inhibitor that you've added after commissioning, and also the cleanliness of the system after commissioning. So you need to confirm that that's all been done. But really importantly, that is something that you need to be doing on an annual basis thereafter throughout the life of the system. And given that we're now moving towards low temperature heating systems, we're now going to be operating systems potentially at 55 degrees C, and that's a temperature below which bacteria isn't killed. You need a pasteurization temperature of about 62 degrees to kill off bacteria. So we may be seeing within residential systems some effects of bacterial growth, either through causing slimes and blockages or microbially induced corrosion. So that's all been taken into consideration with the update to 7593. So this is the process, and apologies if it's a little bit repetitive from the slide before. You're reading from the top left. You need to complete your chemical clean and freshwater flush. Nothing's changed there. You then should be installing your inline filter. The reason that you do that after the flush is so you don't effectively fill the filter up with rubbish by commissioning the system through it. You then add your chemical inhibitor and your biocide if one is required. Undertake your water test, and the final point here is that inhibitor needs to either be redosed on a 5-year rolling cycle, or to undertake a complete laboratory analysis of the system water to make sure that the system water hasn't changed. Now, the reason that has been added is because there's always been an incorrect assumption that inhibitors don't break down over time. They do. They've got a very large organic component, so that can degrade. The inhibitor gets used up as part of the corrosion process, and with drain downs that are taking place very often for maintenance, the inhibitor can fall below the required level that's needed in the system. The main check, in all honesty, is whether or not the inhibitor has enough efficacy left. If you were doing this technically correctly, you would be going through a full laboratory test. But the reality is that if you do that and you are required to come back and do some additional work on the system, which is generally to improve the level of protection from the inhibitor, then that's a second visit for you guys going back to a heating system. So the option has been made there for you to simply redose with an inhibitor. Not going to cause you a problem if the inhibitor is over the manufacturer's specified dose rate, because the NSF inhibitor standards, which everything is made, test all inhibitors up to 10 times dose rate to make sure they have no adverse effect on any component within the system, up to 10 times dose rate. So we know that we're perfectly safe if you go and add an additional inhibitor into the system. Benchmark. Mentioned previously that Benchmark is going to be taking quite a leading role in the way that systems are monitored moving forward. This actually shouldn't be much of a change for you guys, because I know absolutely all of you go out and religiously fill in your benchmark paper document and submit that to the homeowner, who religiously guards that in a locked room so it never ever gets lost. Sarcasm aside, Benchmark has been a little bit of a toothless animal, but that is all set to change with Part L. As you will note at the bottom of the statement here, The benchmark commissioning checklist can be used to show that commissioning has been carried out satisfactorily for the heating and hot water system and its heat generation source. For those of you that are really on the ball and have been and had a look at the new digital benchmark, you could move to the next slide, please, Claire. This has been a development by the boiler manufacturers within HHIC. And it's really been done as a tool to make it easier for you guys to register everything that you need to do to meet the requirements of Part L. So it walks you through all of those steps, all the steps that you need to do in terms of commissioning a boiler as it is at the moment. But note that it said on the previous slide that you can use benchmark for commissioning the heat generation source. As we speak, the development is ongoing to extend the benchmark scheme to cover heat pumps, heat interface units, commercial boilers, a whole range of other heat appliances will be covered by benchmark. So watch this space. The other addition that's coming to the family of products is a web-based portal, because HHIC received a fair amount of comment back regarding the app to say that a lot of you guys prefer to do it in the evening on a PC. So that will be out imminently. The app as it stands is very much what's referred to as a minimum viable product. It's out there to give you enough information to do the job, but it will be improved on feedback from the field, from you guys, as we move forward. So it's a work in progress. So just to round up on what you need to do in terms of commissioning a heating system, and the important points to take away from this is that there has been a change to the way that Part L has been written. You only need to go to one document for either new systems or existing systems. It's applicable, the commissioning regime that we've just talked through is applicable regardless of what heat appliance you've got fitted to your system, because it's effectively treatment for the system rather than treatment for the appliance. And that treatment process does now require the installation of a permanent inline filter. It does require redosing of that inhibitor on a 5-year cycle, and also those annual checks on the inhibitor level to make sure that it's constantly doing the job that's been put in there to do. And absolutely remember to consider using biocides as well for those low temperature systems. And wrapping it all together is digital benchmark, which will be the go-to tool moving forwards for compliance and for ensuring that you get your boiler warranties from the OEMs. It's going to be available as well, worth mentioning, through the boiler loyalty schemes, and it will be used as a requirement for meeting any extended warranties that you hope to get from the boiler manufacturer. Okay, back to you, Claire.
Fantastic. Thank you, Neil. Hopefully that was a good overview of the details of Part L, BS7593. And really, if you haven't already taken a look at the digital version of Benchmark, I suggest that you do. One of the questions that we have here is about whether or not they're going to remove the paperless version of Benchmark. And, you know, I think that Neil will be able to cover that in terms of whether or not that's going to be removed. So we're going to move on to a Q&A now. So please fire any questions that you have, whether it be scenario-based questions, whether it be practical questions. We're here to answer them for you either tonight, or we're able to answer those after today if we don't get time to do so. So we'll just quickly answer that question that we had, Neil, about whether or not they're going to get rid of paper versions of Benchmark.
Okay, there will be a phased removal of the paper copy. It's not going to be something that's done imminently, but there is a commitment from all of the boiler manufacturers to remove it. So what you'll see as you move forward is on the paper copy, there will be, for example, a QR code, which will give you a link to filling it in electronically, but ultimately it will go. I see there's two more questions here. Do you want me to pick those up straight away?
Yeah, sure, fire away.
A question from Alan saying, is there a chemical test for biocide? Does this need to be tested along with the inhibitor? Does it have the same 10 times dose rate? A very good question, Alan. There isn't as yet an on-site test for biocide that is simple to do. It needs to go to a lab at this point in time. It is something that I know that industry is working on. And who will police compliance? Let me answer that. The benchmark scheme will be used by the boiler manufacturers to police compliance. It's not the Part L and building regulations, because you guys are all signed up to a competent person scheme. It's expected that you guys are perfectly knowledgeable and capable of selecting the right thing to do. Where it will be used, benchmark for the OEMs will be compliance for warranties. So that's one of the methods by which it will be policed, although I don't particularly like that word.
I think also the point that Colin, you were making about, in ensuring that the customer is fully aware of the requirements that are needed.
Yeah, absolutely, Claire. I think thank you, Neil, because I say it's been really eye-opening to hear all those things. And I was thinking to myself then that we should be embracing all of this. This isn't with my installer head on, Claire. All this is it's not rocket science. It's about us getting into a really good place. So really looking forward to making sure that we can help engineers to comply and obviously to carry out the right processes.
And I think the important thing to note is that these are all put into place, as Neil said, to reduce the amount of carbon emissions, sustainability and a sustainable future, but also to prolong the life of those heating systems. We talk about the best practice in British standards, and it is all around extending the life of those heating systems and making them work as efficiently as they can do for as long as they can do. So I think that we were talking earlier about that actually, if one question that we had was, what if a customer refuses to have any of those elements as part of the install, and how would you approach that, Colin?
Yes, again, we'll say if the homeowner, we have to advise them that, these processes there to help. And again, I think, Claire, one of the key at the moment, obviously cost-wise, efficiency, the fuel bills are going to go through the roof. So a homeowner needs to be aware of how important their system is running effectively and efficiently by carrying out those procedures. And obviously, if they don't want to take it on board, they are not going to comply. And obviously their warranty, etc., could be a big concern. And we have to make them aware of these things, unfortunately. And this is a wonderful opportunity to show with your benchmarking that you have complied from an engineer's point of view.
I think one point as well is to make sure that you put anything in writing, to your customer if it was refusal of any part of that, so that you, to some degree, make sure that everybody is aware of that situation.
Yeah, because I was going to say, Claire, Neil, could I just ask you a question that has come in from one of the training groups that we've had, and one of them was obviously a recommission of a system. So, i.e., a scenario for you, Neil, is we're training a system down, we're replacing a few components, and there isn't a filter on the system. As an engineer, how do I, like Claire was saying, document it, or do I need to? What would you advise me to do regarding that? The customer doesn't want to filter on the system.
Customer doesn't want to filter on the system. Okay. The reality is that if you're using Benchmark, you have an obligation within the benchmark to note whether the system has or hasn't got a filter fitted. In reality, if you can't progress with the notification through Benchmark if you tick no to the filter. It doesn't actually allow you that option at this point in time. So I guess that you would need to be informing your customer that it is now a requirement under building regulations, and but ultimately it's their decision. It's not going to prevent the heating system working, quite clearly, but what it may do is affect their warranty with the OEM. On that point, there's a couple of questions that have come in regarding Benchmark still. Will Benchmark document be linked into manufacturers' portals, e.g. Valent, Glowworm, etc.? Absolutely, it will. That's the whole intention of it. That should be the main way for you guys to get onto it. Is the way for other engineers to view the benchmark if installed by somebody else? Yes, you should be able to put the serial number for that boiler in, and it will give you all of the work that's been undertaken up to that point on that system. There's also a benchmark for the homeowner, so consequently the homeowner can have that data as well if they've got the benchmark app loaded. The benchmark government are quite keen to extend this as a process beyond the heating industry and extend it into energy performance certificates, for example. So all of that information will link into that. And another quick question here from David: will we be able to export a copy of the benchmark to our operating system? Yes, all that work is being done again as we speak, and there's an expectation that should be delivered, I believe, by the end of June, but don't hold me on that. But I do know that the work is currently underway. There's a question here, sorry, if you were just about to jump in, Colin, that I thought I may as well answer since we get it on every single presentation that's done. Why are we not using VDI water treatment for heating systems? Very simple answer. VDI is not a water quality standard. It's a code of practice used by German engineers, and the main way you control corrosion with that is through the design and installation of the heating system. It's not through interacting with it once the system is built. Very different, built to different standards in Germany, and therefore not applicable here in the UK. A question regarding residential park homes and static caravans that I actually don't know the answer to. Do you know the answer to that one, Colin? Residential park homes. I guess we can find the answer to that. That just simply needs us to reread it with.
We'll have a look at that one. Yeah, it's not a problem. We can. Yeah, absolutely. But I say, Claire, I think that's we're picking up some very interesting points again here, and I think it's really good to see the interaction that's coming through there. I think also, Neil, could I just ask you another, while we're on this, I think, again, it was the scenarios that I think a lot of guys and girls out there are we've shown how it can be implemented. We just need that bit of support. And I think with my engineer's head on, Neil, I was just wondering, we talked about it earlier. Can I just confirm this with you, Neil, that the 15th of June, from the 15th of June, I am servicing a boiler. I should be testing the water every year for inhibitor levels and water quality. And that should be logged with Benchmark.
Yes, that's correct. If you go into the Benchmark app, you have two sections, one for installing a boiler and one for maintaining a boiler. So any intervention on the boiler needs to be logged, and that annual service requirement, it walks you through the steps of what you need to do in terms of checking the inhibitor levels and cleaning out the filter. All that's covered within the Benchmark app.
Fantastic. And just I've got another one here, if I may. Sorry, Neil, I'm on a roll now. It was interesting because obviously Benchmark and Part L have been ongoing. Are you expecting any further changes or amendments over the next year or so? This is going to get in place now and be set in stone, or?
Building regulations and ADL is a bit of rolling feasts. I think we're on about number 7 or 8 since 2005. However, having said that, in order to go through a change to building regulations, it goes through a government consultation. That consultation has been done. There can be no fundamental changes to Part L. There can be typos amended, that sort of thing. And there already has been one of those done. No fundamental changes to the document. It's interesting though, because this will be probably the shortest lived Part L in history, because the intention is to replace it with the Future Home Standard, due to come in 2025. So consultation on Future Home Standard is expected to start in 2023 with implementation in 24. So this is why this is referred to as an uplift. It's not a complete revamp. It's an uplift, and often referred to by government as a stepping stone to the Future Home Standards.
Fantastic. Thank you. Claire.
Excellent.
Back to you.
Okay, so we have a few more questions that were provided to us before we'd sent the invite out. So got a couple of here. So let me, if one of them was talking about what if, I know one of the guys on here was saying about sometimes the existing pipeworks coming from the wall into the boiler makes it next on impossible to fit a filter. What should we do in those instances?
That is absolutely a question for Mr. Yerp.
Yes, so thank you, Neil. Well, first of all, Claire, I would say to you, from an engineering point of view, there is always a way around of getting a filter in somewhere. Like I say, a pipe, we don't want to see pipes particularly, but obviously, as an engineer, we can alter pipes. That's the first thing I would say. And there is always a position somewhere. A filter on the system should always be there. So, we recommend always on the return. But again, if we can get it on the flow where there might be a little bit, most of new build or new houses will have valves where you can actually get a filter in underneath there. So you should be out there. There is always a way, Claire. I'm sorry, as an engineer, we can alter pipe work, and that's, I'm sorry, I won't accept that you can't get a filter in.
True. I think you even found in my house, which is about 5 or 6 years old, which there was no room around that boiler whatsoever, but you found room for that filter somewhere else.
Absolutely. Like I say, it just a little bit of thought, and yeah, like I say, we can be done, I promise you.
So there is also a couple of questions actually beforehand where it's just clarity of whether or not a water sample needs to be taken every year during the annual service.
you do. Sorry, you want me to say that, Colin, or do you want to?
No, you carry on, Neil. No, go on. Save home.
You need to check the quality of the water. You don't need to undertake a laboratory test. You can do that with an on-site test. But yes, you do have to do that. And again, this is going to be an amendment to the benchmark app. I mentioned that it's being improved as we move forward. And one of those improvements will be to allow you to log directly any result from a smart application that does that testing, for example, straight into the benchmark app. So I noticed as well, just scrolling through, there was a question earlier. Forgive me if I can't pick out the right person. Amazingly, we have loads and loads of questions coming through. So Colin, you don't have to ask me a question about your dog anymore.
No, sorry.
There was a question regarding I don't know, I've lost it now. So apologies for that. No, it's gone. Sorry. There's also a question here that I will grab while I'm here with. Sorry, clearly I don't have all of the opened questions here. Otherwise, I will be able to pick them out much faster. Regarding somebody not being gas safe registered because they fit oil systems, and do we have any clout with Benchmark to be able to get them registered? If you drop us an email, I can pick that up directly because I'm on the Benchmark steering committee. So I'll take that back and try to resolve that for you. Apologies, I can't find the question scrolling.
Yeah, it's from Christian on there. Indeed. So the other thing that people are talking about is underfloor heating. So Colin, we're kind of working with a lot of people who are now fitting underfloor heating. So we've talked about biocide. Is there anything in addition that they need to do if they're working on a system that has radiators and underfloor heating?
Yeah, I think Neil was mentioning about the commissioning. Underfloor heating is a wonderful heat source to have in a property. And again, I think one of the key parts of any system is to make sure it's actually working as it should. And underfloor, once it's set up, and again, the efficiency of the system, again, these underfloors designed by companies, Claire, to make sure it delivers the heat, but it's the commissioning of that system to make sure it's delivering the temperatures in the areas required. So it's just the fact that, make sure that you take your time and get the pipework in, flushed thoroughly. Again, all the things we've just been talking about, spookily enough. But on the floor, make sure you treat it with the biocide. The amount of floor area you have, that, as Neil mentioned, needs to be treated with biocide for the square meterage that you have in there. And obviously then you are going to give that system its optimum chance of working effectively and efficiently.
Great. And there's also a question about, we've talked about testing, annual testing, and obviously the lab testing as well. But in terms of, I think this is a really towards the annual testing, the question is there an optimum point in the system to take the water sample?
Right, yeah, so Claire, what we would recommend there are certain areas that we would recommend for the sample, and basically we would say from the central part of the system, Claire, where the water is constantly being circulated, so you can get an understanding of what is being moved around the system. Water testing, we not necessarily low points, Claire, where possibly dead legs, etc., where that flow isn't there. That's not the water that's going around the system on a regular basis. We want to understand what's going on there. We want to make that system efficient and effective. So that's where we will look. So from a central point system, a radiator and a hallway landing from the top of it, very easy to do in a small sample bottle, and away you go. And as Neil mentioned, an on-site test will give you straight away an understanding of what is going on and possibly remedial work, etc.
And another question we had is the annual test that you need to do only for inhibitor?
Again, really good questions. No, so obviously we're looking for, so remember the cleanliness of the system. Neil mentioned that as well. So obviously inhibitor is one key component. Corrosion. Is corrosion occurring? Now, if corrosion is occurring, we certainly need to be looking to address that, because obviously that's going to affect our pH. What is our pH value in the water system? Because we don't want it acidic and we don't want it alkali. We want it in the middle there. And obviously a visual of the turbidity. So in theory, we've got 4 visuals we can do, 4 tests we can do, Claire, to get an understanding. So yeah, it's not just inhibitor level we need to be doing, remember.
No, and you know, I think that when we're talking about testing as well, obviously there are many tests out there. What kit would you recommend to get the optimum for a cleanliness test?
Yeah, well, absolutely. So obviously, again, it's the ProCheck, which is the best way to on-site testing, which obviously gives us an instant understanding of what's happening in that system. Or obviously a full lab test can be done, obviously, and a 24-hour turnaround from our lab at ADEY there. But, you know, say that there is 2 options where you can do, but an online test with the ProCheck will give you that straight away, that result. And most homeowners, and again, we'll go back to what Neil was talking about, efficiency. They want it done. They want to make sure they're compliant and they're in a good place, so when Coronation Street's on, they're nice and warm, Claire.
Everyone watches Corrie, right? And another question that we had is, if part of Benchmark, do you also register that you've done a flush on the system, Neil? Is that part of the app?
Yes, it is. It's a requirement to log that you've done that flush for the commissioning, for the installation, and to log what product you've done, because it's always really important as well to make sure, not necessarily with cleaner, but with inhibitor as well, you log the product, because you shouldn't be mixing different types of inhibitors in a heating system. There's a question that's come in from Daryl. I think wants just a little bit of confirmation, really. Are we saying that you need to fill out a service benchmark after every service, additional time and cost to us with the customer? The digital benchmark is intended to replace a traditional service record. So things like logging your flue gas temperatures, etc., just do it straight into the app as you do your service. Or if you want to do that later, you can do it on the web portal. But it's no different to giving somebody a paper service record.
Okay, great. We had quite a good scenario question that had come in, which was talking about if I have to move a boiler in an existing home, do I need to recommission it, or do I need to recommission a boiler if I'm moving one which has been fitted in a property already?
Section 10 Part L covers this. As I mentioned before, it's applicable to existing systems as well as to new build. So if you are installing a new system or changing components on a system within an existing property, there is a requirement to commission the system.
Right.
Mm. I think that's a really key point there, just for the guys and girls out there. I think it's really a real excellent point.
Yeah, I mean, you know, these things are always, there's scenarios whereby we may or may not know in that scenario what you should and shouldn't do. I think the key is this: if you're in any doubt, then ADEY are here to be able to support you and answer that information for you. So if you had any further questions, obviously after this session, then you can fire those over to info@adey.com, and we will answer those questions for you at any time, or you can call our customer services team, who will be able to, if they don't know the answer themselves, speak to our experts here to be able to do that for you. So we had another one from Mark here, who also is a big fan of the Atom, go Atom, being in tiny spaces. But his question was about MC plus biocide is left in the system, ? Colin.
biocide left in the system. That is the idea of biocide, to leave it in the system, Claire. So obviously biocide goes in the system with inhibitor and stays in there. I'm not quite sure what we're at that angle was coming at, but yeah, no, so biocide goes into the system, as Neil mentioned, for the downtime of the heating system during the summer when the heating's not on. So no, leave it in there is the answer there.
Leave it there, let it do its work.
I guess the reason that question comes about is because you get some biocides which are short-term biocides and only used to kill the bacteria. So you put those in, take them out. Whereas this is MC10 plus is what we refer to as a long-term biocide. And the whole point of that is to continually protect the heating system whilst it's operating.
Okay, great. We have a question here, which is also about, is there anything specified as to what constitutes flushing the system? So how involved did this need to be, as it could range from a simple chemical put in the system prior to installation or a full flush with external flushing system with a magnetic filter. So is what constitutes a flush?
In terms of BS 7593, you can still use either a mains flush or a power flush or a magna cleanse. All of those are allowed within BS 7593. The only one that I believe was removed was gravity flush, where you fill the system and drain it down. Because you should be able to mains flush a heating system as an absolute minimum.
Okay. And another one we have from Daryl. Thanks for your questions, Daryl. Do all the test kits monitor all makes of chemicals used within the system? Colin?
Yes, so yeah, our universal water test. So yeah, all the well-known brands, Claire, can be assessed via the project.
Yeah, but ours can, but it's not necessarily all test kits will monitor all inhibitors or chemicals. So it's important that if you're going to, use a kit, if you can use a universal one, it helps to be able to monitor for all chemicals or anything that has molybdate in it. So the ADEY Project kit is a universal test kit that will test for all chemical inhibitors. Okay, so I think that's about it in terms of questions. We have quite a few more here, but I think that what we will do is, some of them are quite specifics. There's a couple about tenant properties, new builds, etc. We will get back to everybody in answer to your question. But as I said, if you have any that you would like to ask us directly, please send them to info@adey.com and we will send them over to you. After today, you'll receive later on in this week a copy of this recording. Also, as I said, a quick guide to help you flow through those processes that we walked through. So thank you for everybody who joined us this evening. Thanks to the panelists. I hope that's really helped, and we'd love any feedback. Neil, did you have something?
Yeah, just one more point. Just quickly scrolling through these, there's a couple of questions about issues people are having with the Benchmark app. As I mentioned, it is a minimum viable product, and we will be finding things that don't necessarily work all the time that we need to fix. So if you've got specific issues, ping those into us as well, and I will take them back to Benchmark. I'll take them directly to the developers so that we can get those fixes put in place for people, because it's really, really important that this becomes a valuable working tool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Great. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, panelists, and I hope you enjoy your evening.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone.